Okay, well, listen, as excellent as that track is, Sailor, in my opinion, the album just keeps getting better and better because the next one has that classic David Gilmour vibe to it. Super tasty guitar tone, soulful playing. The track's called Prisoners, and it does capture that mood of longing and loneliness, and it's preceded appropriately enough by one of your more serious spoken word passages alluding to the horrors of war. So why don't you talk us through the spoken segment and then on into the track itself?
Well, what that was originally how that seg started was I had a little tape recorder at the time when my grandparents gave to me at Christmas time, when I must have been maybe eight or nine. It was called a Juliet tape recorder, and it had those little 3-inch reels, like the kind that was Good Morning, Mr. Phelps, and the kind that would destroy it after the mission, And I recorded along with Jim. Started recording everything. And one of these tapes I recorded, it was, we had the church that we went to was Walnut Creek Presbyterian Church. And there was, the pastors there were Ned Richardson and William Stoddard. And there was a phone that you could call if you were having spiritual crisis called Strength for Today. It was 935-1717, pal. And you would call that phone, and there would be a recorded voice of either of them reading like an observation, something to give you spiritual strength for the day. And so Jim and I would record those, because we just thought, oh, that's cool to have, just for whatever reason. And I've kept those. And so what happened was at the beginning of this was a tape that had cassette tape that had gotten eaten or something. And so you heard this this weird stuff going through it. And I went, man, that's a creepy ass sound. What is that? And it was just a tape being messed up. So I recorded the tape being messed up as a sound bed. And I said, this really is kind of cool. I wonder what I can put in front of this. And I started just going through stuff, and I found a piece from that Strength for Today thing of William Stoddard, Reverend Stoddard, talking. And I thought, man, that's heavy what he's talking about, and the way that he put it together. And so I used that as a template, and then started putting in sound effects like a horse or a bobcat or whatever went with it. My old guitar instructor is in there counting off. A couple of kids' records I used to listen to sped backwards. Just different things. It's almost like a Salvador Dali painting where you see tangible objects, but you really don't know how they're, why you would think to put that in there. But there's all these reasoning behind things that he's talking about in the middle of that, and then right at the end, and there's all these footsteps that are walking through it constantly. So because he's saying, "I'll walk today," down the lanes of hate, and so it's as if you're in one person perspective, and you're going through this alley of all this debauchery and horror, like you say, the horrors of war. And then at the end, it's just like it completely dead stops, and saying, "Why, God, why?" And there's a bit of silence there, and then this track starts, and it sets the mood for the track, and it's the track is, again, it's a lot bluer in its environment, and it's kind of a comment on ourselves after we graduate from childhood, so to speak, and that feeling that we're not immortal anymore, that we were born with that originally, but somewhere along the line, the world, can beat us up pretty good. And so we're kind of prisoners of that thinking when we want to try and get back to that feeling of being really connected like we were when we were children. And so that's what the track is, a very melancholy kind of delivery, from that.
Yeah, it is. And Pink Floyd goes melancholy from time to time. And, that's why it's sort of, I connected it with that, but it's still your own thing and your own production and everything. But it's particularly appealing to people who like Pink Floyd. Let's just say it like that.
Well, I think so too. And Gilmour, again, like Ronnie, Gilmour is a major influence because he's a master of phrasing. He's a master of phrasing in the band that was the most patient band in the world. Their heart rate never got above 60 BPM. It was just they would paint these great paintings, with their music. You listen to Careful with That Oxygen, you listen to, Wish You Were Here, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, all of that stuff. It's just amazing stuff. And he takes these wonderful breaths between, like he's feeding you a gourmet meal, and he's allowing you to chew it and swallow the food before you have another bite. And so that's kind of was a template for this tune as far as the expression went.
They are not a band in a hurry. That's true. Almost like a guy with 25 years between his solo albums.
Well,
No, but hey, I'd love to have a financial stake in that back catalog. Pink Floyd, Echoes. Come on, that's going to sell forever, man.
Of course.
Yeah, another great track. But another thing that's great about this album, it isn't like you're just doing the same thing track after track. Everything's different. And that's a great one. Actually, it's one of my favorite tracks on there. Also, the segue that you described is interesting, but we're not giving everything away here. Everybody has to hear that one for themselves. The next two tracks are clearly related because they're literally titled Part 1 and Part 2. Mentioned one track features vocals. That's going to be this. This actually sounds a lot like a Keith Emerson band track to me for a variety of reasons. It's called The Eruption of John Minimum. Clearly a tale is being told here.
Yeah, well, you're like hitting every one of these out of the park, Dan. You've been practicing.
I've had your album for 24 hours.
Well, this particular track was done at the time we were doing the Keith Emerson Band record. That's why it gets Greg Bissonette and Bob Birch. We did them in the same sessions, and I brought this one to the table, and it was going to be part of the House of Ocean-Born Mary off the side one of that album. But Keith and I both thought it's a bit too rock for what we're doing. He says, I love the track, but it's a bit too rock. And I said, yeah, I don't know what to do with it. And he goes, well, why don't you just do it on your solo album? He said it very coy. And I said, well, maybe I will. So in response to that, then I figured I better. So he's having a nice laugh upstairs, the fact that I actually did go to it and put it on the solo album. But you've got Greg Bissonette back there, just brilliant drumming, and on both parts 1 and part 2. And then and Bob Birch was on part 1. Mick Mahan, who was on also in the boys club that replaced Bob when Bob had to go back out with Elton, is doing part 2. So that was why that was most appropriate, was the fact that you have both of those guys back to back on the same, the pair of songs that are related. So yeah, that was part of the Keith Emerson Band thing.
The setup for this one is interesting. It features a speech about ships and the wind, but it's underpinned by the sound of a car starting and then either taking off or crashing. Is the commentary in the ship's meant to be playing on the car radio?
Well, yeah, that's what it is he's loading his weapon and pulling the windows up. It's over because you can hear him tuning the dial until he comes in on this. And this is Ned Richardson from the other pastor at the church, and I thought it was great too. And what the song is about, what both of these songs, I'll group them together because they're both related. The first part is lyrical and the second part is instrumental, but it's basically about somebody who has been largely ignored their whole life. The guy who lives down the street that keeps to himself, that everybody says, oh, he was a very quiet man, very pleasant man, but he kept to himself, and he was the guy in the yearbook that you never remember, like, oh, I went to school with you. You did? I don't ever remember. People that don't really leave much of an impression for whatever reason. And until one day when they break and they snap and they walk into a mall or they walk into a synagogue and decide to light it up. And then all of a sudden everybody knows who they are. And you think, how did this happen? This guy had no prior, this guy didn't torture animals growing up. He was just this normal guy, had a normal job, a very normal person. What happened to him? When did that road diverge? And I had dreamt the title. I woke up one day and it was like, what is that? The Eruption of John Minimum. And I thought, what does that mean? And so I had to kind of think about it for a minute. And it kind of came to me that it was Minimum being just the normal little guy, but finally erupting. And so the first part of it, the lyrics kind of will communicate those ideas that we're talking about his last hours on the planet. And then the second part is kind of a musical collage of the personality shifts that would take place during the unfolding of the actual event. It's a very dark and very sinister type of tune, but there are moments of euphoria in there as well. There's some because these guys, you think about the parents of these people, and the fact that he was loved. Usually, at some point, the child was loved, and then maybe something happened and destroyed that or made them go in a different direction. It's like cars in a junkyard. At one point, people took pride in those cars when they first got them. I always think of that.
Yeah.
But now they're rusted and no one cares anymore. And this is kind of what these guys are. They're abandoned cars. And so this is a car that just got pointed in a direction, and that's what the second part of this is basically all of those shifts in personality that are in a person's last hours on the planet, when they're involved in doing something like this. So it's a bit dark, but I thought it needed to be said.
Yeah, and another sort of different flavor on the album. I like that you came up with John Minimum, because you didn't go John Doe or Joe Average, or a phrase that everybody already knows.
So I had no choice. It wasn't me that came up with it. It was whoever my muses are said, "Hey, try this one. You can figure it out later. Just put it on the damn record." I can't really take credit for it. It's just something I dreamt.
Yeah, but it's cool that once you explain it's that sort of overlooked guy. Putting minimum is not even Joe Average. It's less than average.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And then, you can just listen to the music and know it's about somebody snapping. and the segue, that's what's so great about that you don't just go track to track like we usually do by putting these little segues in, by having relevance to them. It does really expand the listening experience without really having lots of vocals on the album. Like you said, there's the human element. Well, as a little compromise for the listeners, we're going to play part 1, but we're going to hold back part 2. So
2 is actually my son's favorite song. He loves that song because he's into the more aggressive, bizarre kind of key shifts and rhythm things. So that's his favorite song on the album. This is part 2.
We're not playing it because it isn't good. On the contrary, I'm playing part 1 because it's the only thing with vocals, and that makes it different than other stuff we've heard. And we're going to know who's playing the organ towards the end of this too.
Probably.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So let's give a listen from Celluloid Debris, The Eruption of John Minimum, Part 1.
One ship sails east, another west, by the self-same wind that blows. It's not the gale, but the set of the sail that determines which way they go. Some people are driven to distraction and despair by the wind of circumstance. Trouble comes, temptation, failure, tragedy, and they collapse under the pressure.
So that's part one. And for anybody curious about the second part, Mark explained how it goes through moods. And it definitely has a prog feel, maybe some of the most prog stuff on there. And I can see why your son likes it. Yeah. And yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. So you exit that two-parter with one of the most intriguing segues on the album. It sounds very personal and appears to be like a very direct link back to Double E Ticket, specifically the segue between Afterburner and Hurling Blues Skyward. Almost sounds like a continuation of a conversation.
Well, it is. It's a continuation of my guitar lesson when I was 10 that Jim Gammon recorded. Mm-hmm. It's Bill Tapia is my guitar teacher at the time. He was a great player. Played with the Charlie Barnett band. And this was me. My dad, you can hear him in there too. This was me. Apparently, I wasn't getting the tune down well enough that I thought I had it nailed. And apparently I wasn't. And so you hear Bill saying, look, man, you ain't getting this. It's hard to play. And my dad says, maybe you should play something else. And you can see how cocky I was. Like, no, I want to play this one, you know. So it's just kind of this funny. It is a callback from Double E, and then kind of a, you know, one of those things where that's how I was and here's how I am as he counts in the next song. You know, like there's been a little bit of growth, you know, from that to the next tune, which is Arclight.
I just intuitively knew that the kid was you. Both times, nobody had to tell me. I mean, everybody listen to this.
Now, what are you going to play? Well, what do you want to play? Something that you know how to play good.
Oh, well, first, this is my lesson.
I know. Forget the lesson if you're going to play.
Oh, I can play this.
You can play this?
Yeah.
All right. You know the chords to this?
Uh-huh.
If you don't know it, don't play.
No, I know.
You know it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, I'll count 1, 2, 3, then you.
Okay.
Da-dee-da.
No.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. You play it all off time. You're not getting this. It's hard to play.
Why don't you play another one?
You better do
I'm
it.
playing this one.
1, 2, wait. 2, 3, 4, play.
Why don't you play another one? No, I'm playing this one.
Yeah, I wasn't good at taking no for an answer back then. My parents will attest to it. You know, it was just, I came to play this tune, man. I'm going to play this tune, you know. And
well, when I say it sounds very personal, I mean, it's literally you as a kid. And
yeah, it's being 10 years old.
I can't imagine having my lesson be recorded and having my parent hovering over me. And instead of like shrinking away from that, you're like, I don't care if I'm being recorded. I don't care if my dad's in the room. I can do this.
Yeah. That was my attitude then and now. Even my dad's in the room now. I can still play. I'm good, you know.
Well, even though there are 3 more tracks on the album yet to come, that is in fact, appropriately enough, I guess, the final segue. The rest of the music just flows without comment. And the next track, Arclight, kind of reminds me of a Dixie Dregs composition. You know, kind of like prog rock with the emphasis on the rock. Who was your personnel on that one?
That's again, you're picking all the ones with Joe Travers. That's me and Joe Travers again. However, on this tune, it was a little bit interesting. I've shared the songwriting credits with Gary Hull, who was a great keyboardist. He was roommates with me back in, I want to say 83, 84. And I saw him playing in a band called Ian Shelter back up in the Bay Area. And he had a modular system like Keith, so I was just like, "Oh man, we gotta do some work together," you know, because he was a major Keith fan, of course. And we struck up a great friendship and did some work with a drummer named Don Frank down in San Jose. So we had a band called White House, and we did. You know, this was a lot of like during the electronical 80s, and he had written this song. It was on a cassette tape. It was kind of like I don't know how it wasn't. It was kind of finished, then it wasn't kind of finished. But he came up with this dun 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 dun. This great. He had tuned his Prophet, I think, into fifths, and done these great chords that I just loved. And I said, man, we got to do something with that, you know. But we never did. But I retained the cassette, and when I was going back over to find segs and stuff, I found this thing. It said Funfair. I went, oh man, that was Gary's tune. Let me put it in. And I went, it still sounds great. Okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna do something with it. And so I had to go find him because I wanted to get his permission. I didn't want to just do it, then have him go, no, you're not gonna do that. So I tracked him down. He is in Santa Cruz, and he was so glad to hear from me. He said he'd been following my career for years and all of this. So I said, look, I wanted to do this song. Are you cool with that? And he goes, absolutely. You kidding me? Go ahead. So his cornerstones go all the way through the music, certain areas that he's done. And then I've written parts in between that. So it was a real co-writing kind of thing and then I put melodies and stuff to all of it, and then the instrumentation. But it's really is a co-writing effort on both of us, even though he had no idea that it was going to be that way originally. So that's what this is.
Wow.
And yeah, it's very proggy.
Wow. Well, I have personal resonance with that. Remember when I said earlier that when Spinal Tap came out, I was playing in club bands?
Yeah. Well,
remember also when I said I was from Sacramento?
Yeah.
Ian Shelter. We played with those guys all the time.
Dude, see? There you are.
99.9% of listeners with Ian Shelter's just some local forgotten band, but I knew all those guys. They were good. They had a
great.
Nice sound to them. And because I was a keyboard/guitar player in those days.
You remember Gary?
Yeah, I remember one time he took my, I had of course, a DX7, because being the year it was.
Yeah.
He took my, just for a moment, I wasn't looking, and he took my Anvil case. He just moved it about 12 feet around the corner of the stage, so I think it was lost or stolen or something. And I was just like looking around, and I could just tell by looking at him that he had done something. He couldn't move it too far. The sucker was heavy, but it's so funny. As soon as you said that name, Ian Shelter, Michael Urbano and I did a little back and forth one time on email of all the Sac bands from those days we could remember, because you mentioned Bourgeois Tag. Of course, I was contemporary with those guys too. Not only the other bands, but the venues, the El Dorado Saloon, the Shire Road Pub, the Rock Factory, the Oasis Ballroom. And Tesla, and those guys.
Sure, City Kid.
Frank Hannon, yeah, they were City Kid. And Ronnie, I saw Ronnie play in downtown Sacramento too.